I still remember the day we set out on our ill-fated adventure. The group of us had been planning this expedition for months, each of us drawn to the mysterious allure of Ravenswood Manor like moths to a flame. We were a diverse bunch, a former academic, a photographer, a journalist, and I, an adventurer with a taste for the unknown. Our destination was shrouded in secrecy, but the whispers of an ancient cult and twisted Kabbalistic rituals had piqued my curiosity. As we embarked on our journey, the biting cold air seemed to cling to us like a damp shroud. We trudged through the knee-deep snow, our footsteps echoing off the frozen trees. The landscape was desolate, as if nature itself was warning us to turn back. But we pressed on, driven by an otherworldly sense of purpose. Our guide, a grizzled local named Marcus, navigated the treacherous terrain with ease, his eyes fixed on some unseen horizon. We followed him in silence, our breath visible in the chill air as we climbed higher into the frozen wilderness. The trees grew taller and closer together here, casting long, ominous shadows that seemed to writhe like living things. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that unblinking eyes were trained on us from the darkness. As the sun began to set, casting a sickly orange glow over the landscape, Marcus halted at the edge of a frozen lake. We gathered around him, our faces lit by the faint light of his lantern. He raised his hands, and we fell silent, as if waiting for some signal to begin our descent into the heart of Ravenswood Manor's darkness. As we stepped off the snow-covered path and onto the crumbling driveway, an unsettling atmosphere enveloped us like a shroud. The air was heavy with the scent of decay and rot, and I could feel the weight of years of abandonment bearing down upon us. Despite the foreboding ambience, our group's curiosity propelled us forward, and we began to explore the abandoned estate. At first, it seemed as though we had stumbled into a well-preserved museum, the grand foyer and sweeping staircase gleaming with a faint, otherworldly light. However, as we delved deeper into the mansion, signs of recent habitation became apparent. A torn piece of fabric caught in the window lock, a discarded cigarette butt on the floor, and a faint scratch on the wall that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy all served as grim reminders that we were not alone. Our guide, Marcus, led us cautiously through the darkening halls, his eyes scanning every nook and cranny for any sign of danger. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the creaking of old wooden floorboards beneath our feet. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being herded towards some unseen destination, that the very walls of Ravenswood Manor were guiding us deeper into its heart. As we turned a corner, a door slammed shut behind us, and I was left with the unsettling sensation that we had been deliberately kept from something. The air seemed to vibrate with an electric tension, and I could feel my skin crawling with anticipation. Suddenly, Marcus stopped dead in his tracks, his head cocked to one side as if listening for some distant sound. We froze, our hearts pounding in unison, as a faint whisper seemed to caress the edges of our perception. It was a soft, raspy voice speaking words that I couldn't quite make out, but it sent shivers down my spine nonetheless. As we ventured deeper into the mansion, the air grew thick with an eerie, pungent scent that seemed to cling to our skin. Our footsteps echoed off the walls as we navigated the labyrinthine corridors, each step revealing a new layer of decay and neglect. It was as if the very fabric of the house was trying to conceal its secrets from us. I wandered ahead of the group, my eyes scanning the walls for any sign of unusual markings or symbols. That's when I saw them, cryptic etchings that seemed to be pulsing with a faint, malevolent energy. The symbols were ancient, their meaning lost to time, and yet they seemed to hold a dark power over us. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I reached out to touch one of the markings, my fingers tracing the intricate patterns that danced across the wall. Marcus, ever the pragmatist, was skeptical of our discovery, but even he couldn't deny the sense of unease that settled over us like a shroud. We gathered around me, our faces illuminated by the flickering light of our lanterns, as I tried to decipher the meaning behind these mysterious symbols. It was then that we stumbled upon a hidden room, tucked away in a corner of the mansion like a secret heart. The door was locked, but Marcus produced a rusty key and freed us from our prison. Inside, we found a collection of ancient texts, bound in black leather and adorned with the same cryptic symbols we had seen on the walls. They were written in languages I couldn't understand, but the words seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly power. As I opened one of the books at random, a piece of paper slipped out, carrying a message scrawled in ink that seemed to bleed into my skin. The words spoke of a dark cult, one that had worshipped ancient powers and paid the ultimate price for their hubris. And yet, as I read on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone in Ravenswood Manor. That something or someone was watching us from the shadows. As we ventured deeper into the mansion, our hearts pounding with anticipation, we decided to break into the main hall. The grandeur of the room took my breath away, but it was what lay scattered across the floor that made my blood run cold. Artifacts and relics from a bygone era seemed to be strewn about as if they had been discarded in a frenzied ritual. I spotted ancient candles, their wax still warm and strange symbols etched into the walls, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. The air was heavy with the scent of incense and something else, something dark and malevolent. Our guide, Marcus, led us cautiously through the room, his eyes scanning every inch of the space as if searching for hidden dangers. I wandered further, my gaze drawn to a large, stone sarcophagus in the center of the hall. The symbol etched into its lid seemed to match the markings on the walls, and I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that we were getting close to uncovering the secrets of Ravenswood Manor. As I reached out to touch the sarcophagus, a sudden gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging us into darkness. The silence was oppressive, heavy with anticipation. And then in the darkness I heard it, a low, ominous chanting that seemed to come from all directions at once. It was as if the very walls of the mansion were alive and they were summoning something, or someone. I felt a presence behind me and I spun around, my heart racing with fear. That's when I saw her, a figure draped in black, her face twisted into a grotesque grimace. She raised her hands to the sky and the chanting grew louder, more intense. It was then that I realized we were not alone in Ravenswood Manor, and whatever was happening, it was far from over. As I delved deeper into the history of Ravenswood Manor, I stumbled upon an ancient text that detailed twisted rituals that seemed to be connected to another world. The words on the page were written in a language I couldn't understand, but the illustrations depicted a group of robed figures gathered around a glowing portal. They seemed to be performing some sort of dark ceremony, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were getting close to uncovering a sinister plot. Marcus, ever the skeptic, raised an eyebrow as I showed him the text. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice laced with skepticism. "This is just some old superstition," he said, but I could see the faintest glimmer of curiosity in his eyes. We spent the next few hours poring over the text, trying to decipher its meaning. The more we read, the more convinced I became that Ravenswood Manor was connected to something far more sinister than a simple haunted house. It seemed that the manor had been built on an ancient ritual site, and that the cult that had once worshipped there had been trying to summon something from another world. The text spoke of a being known only as the Devourer, a creature from a realm beyond our own that was said to be capable of consuming entire worlds. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I read the words, and I couldn't help but wonder if we were playing with fire by delving deeper into this mystery. But it was too late now. We had to know more. One of the group members, Emily, began to experience strange visions and nightmares, hinting at the darkness within the manor. She would see fleeting images of twisted rituals and human sacrifices, and hear whispers in her ear that seemed to come from nowhere. At first, we thought it was just her imagination playing tricks on her, but as the days went by, her experiences became more vivid and disturbing. I started to notice that she would often wander off on her own, lost in thought, and when I asked her what was wrong, she would simply shake her head and tell me to leave her alone. It was as if she was being pulled into some kind of dark world, one that was beyond our understanding. I tried to reassure her that everything would be okay, but deep down, I knew that we were all in grave danger. The manor seemed to be exerting a malevolent influence over us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched by unseen eyes. As night began to fall, the shadows seemed to grow longer and more sinister, like skeletal fingers reaching out to snatch us. Emily's visions became more intense, and she would often scream in her sleep, as if something was trying to break free from her mind. I knew that I had to do something to help her, but I didn't know what. The manor seemed to be a living entity, a monster that was feeding on our fear and terror. And yet, despite the danger, we couldn't bring ourselves to leave. We were trapped in this nightmare, and I wasn't sure if anyone would ever escape. As tensions rise, the group starts to question each other's sanity, leading to paranoia and mistrust. Emily's visions become more frequent and intense, causing her to become increasingly withdrawn and isolated. She begins to suspect that one of the group members is somehow behind her strange occurrences, but she can't quite put her finger on who it might be. The rest of the group starts to catch on to her paranoia, and soon they're all looking at each other with suspicion. "What's going on with you, Emily?" Marcus asks, his voice laced with concern. "You've been acting really strange lately. Is everything okay?" Emily hesitates, unsure of how to respond. She doesn't want to admit that she's seeing things, but at the same time, she can't deny what she's experiencing. "I don't know," she says finally. "I just feel like something's off." The group exchanges skeptical glances, and for a moment, it seems like they're not sure who to believe. As the night wears on, Emily becomes more and more withdrawn, unable to shake the feeling that she's being watched. She starts to wonder if maybe she is losing her mind after all. But then, something strange happens. She sees one of the group members move out of the corner of her eye, only to turn and find that no one is there. She spins around, but there's still no one there. It's as if she's going crazy. The rest of the group starts to get spooked, and soon they're all talking about Emily's visions and whether or not she's sane. "Maybe we should check her out," Marcus suggests. "See if she's okay." But as they start to search for Emily, they realize that she's nowhere to be found. She's vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a sense of unease and confusion. The group is left standing in the dark, wondering what just happened and whether or not they'll ever see Emily again. As I rummaged through the dusty attic, I stumbled upon an old leather-bound journal belonging to one of the cult members. The cover was worn and cracked, but the pages within were filled with handwritten notes that revealed a descent into madness and horror. As I flipped through the pages, I saw references to dark rituals and human sacrifices, as well as strange symbols and diagrams that seemed to be some sort of code. But it was what came next that made my blood run cold. The writer spoke of an otherworldly presence that had taken hold of their mind, driving them to commit unspeakable acts of violence and depravity. They wrote of hearing voices in the darkness, whispering terrible secrets and tempting them to give in to their basest instincts. As I read on, I felt a creeping sense of dread that seemed to seep into my very bones. The writer's handwriting grew more erratic and illegible, as if they were struggling to keep themselves from succumbing to the madness that had taken hold. And then there was the final entry. It was a single sentence, scrawled across the page in red ink. "I am no longer human." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I read those words, knowing that we were staring into the abyss of the cult's darkest secrets. The journal seemed to be telling me something, but what? That we were playing with forces beyond our control, that the cult had unleashed a horror beyond comprehension. Or was it simply revealing their own descent into madness and inviting us to follow suit? The group decided to explore further, only to be confronted by an unseen entity that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. At first, it was just a faint chill in the air, like the whisper of a cold breeze on a winter's night. But as they delved deeper into the heart of the cult's lair, the sensation grew stronger until it felt like a living thing was wrapping itself around their throats. "What is this?" Marcus whispered, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. It feels like something is watching us." I nodded, my skin crawling with unease. We had been warned about the dangers of the cult's rituals, but nothing could have prepared us for this. The air seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy, like the hum of 1,000 buzzing flies. And then there was the sound, a low, pulsing drone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It was like nothing I had ever heard before, a sound that defied all rational explanation. "What's happening?" Emily asked, her voice trembling with fear. "I don't know," I replied, trying to keep my own voice steady. "But we need to get out of here." But it was too late. The entity had already begun to take shape, coalescing from the shadows like a living thing. It was tall and imposing, its presence seeming to fill the entire room. And then there were the eyes, two glowing orbs that seemed to bore into our very souls. "Welcome," it said, its voice like a cold wind in my ear. "We've been waiting for you." The group froze, paralyzed with fear, as the entity began to move closer. Its presence was like a living thing, wrapping itself around us like a shroud. I knew then that we were in grave danger, and that our only hope of survival lay in uncovering the secrets of the cult's dark rituals. Panic sets in as the group becomes lost in the labyrinthine corridors, with some members turning against each other. The air is thick with fear and uncertainty, and it seems like they'll never find their way out. Emily's vision begins to blur and distort, as if the very fabric of reality is unraveling around her. She sees twisted, nightmarish visions of the cult's rituals, and knows that she's running out of time. Marcus tries to stay calm, but his eyes are wild with fear as he scans the darkness for any sign of escape. The others seem to be losing their grip on sanity, turning against each other in a desperate bid for survival. "We have to keep moving," I shout over the din of panic, but my voice is drowned out by the sound of footsteps and screams. The corridors seem to stretch on forever, with no end in sight. We're trapped in a never-ending nightmare, with no escape from the horrors that lurk within. As I stumble through the darkness, I catch glimpses of things that can't be explained. Shadows move of their own accord, and I see flashes of movement out of the corner of my eye. It's as if the very walls are coming to life against us. The group is starting to break apart, with some members wandering off on their own in search of a way out. I'm not sure which ones will make it back, or how long we'll have to survive before the entity catches up with us. All I know is that we're running out of time, and that the next few minutes will decide our fate forever. I stumbled upon an ancient tome hidden deep within the cult's lair, bound in what looked like human skin. The cover was adorned with strange symbols that seemed to shift and writhe like living things. As I opened the book, a musty smell wafted out, carrying with it the stench of decay and corruption. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, detailing the dark history of Ravenswood Manor and its connection to an ancient evil. According to the text, the manor had been built on a site of great power and darkness, where ancient rituals and human sacrifices had been performed in honor of a long-forgotten deity. The cult's leader, Ravenswood Manor, was revealed to be a direct descendant of this dark lineage, and his twisted experiments were merely a continuation of the same sinister traditions. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read on, realizing that everything we had encountered so far was just a small part of a much larger, more complex web of horror. The entity that had been stalking us was revealed to be an ancient being, one that had been awakened by Ravenswood's rituals and was now feeding on our fear and suffering. I knew then that we were in grave danger, not just from the physical threats around us, but from the very darkness that lurked within ourselves. The book seemed to be telling me that the true horror was not the cult or their rituals, but the darkness that lay at the heart of human nature itself. And as I closed the tome, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all being drawn deeper into this abyss, further and further down the rabbit hole of madness and terror. The protagonist is left alone, facing the true horror of Ravenswood Manor, the darkness within itself, which seems to be consuming everything in its path. As I walked through the empty halls, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being herded towards some unknown fate. The air was thick with an eerie, pulsing energy that seemed to seep from the very walls themselves. I knew then that I had to keep moving, no matter how scared or disoriented I felt. Every step I took felt like a betrayal of my own sanity. The darkness seemed to be closing in around me, suffocating me with its crushing weight. I could feel it seeping into my pores, corrupting my very soul. And yet, I couldn't stop. I had to keep moving, no matter what horrors awaited me at the end of this twisted journey. I stumbled upon a door that seemed out of place in the otherwise decrepit decor. It was old and ornate, with intricate carvings that seemed to writhe like living things on its surface. I knew then that I had to open it, no matter what lay beyond. As I pushed the door open, a wave of darkness washed over me, like a cold, dark tide. I stumbled forward into the unknown, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. And then I saw it. The true horror of Ravenswood Manor. A void so vast and empty that it seemed to have no beginning or end. It was as if the very fabric of reality had been torn apart, revealing a chasm of nothingness that seemed to be consuming everything in its path. I knew then that I was staring into the abyss, with no safety net to catch me if I fell. The void seemed to be calling to me, drawing me in with an otherworldly allure. And yet I couldn't resist. I had to see what lay at the heart of this horror, no matter how it would consume me whole. As I took a step forward into the void, everything went black.